Do you understand the 5 levels of wealth, where you are in the hierarchy and what you have to do to move up? That's what we're going to discuss in today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast. So welcome, because we're here to help investors gain clarity amongst the confusion of the many mixed messages so they can develop the financial freedom they're looking for. And today we're going to be discussing a topic that's very close to my heart, the habits that shape success. If you've ever wondered why some people seem to climb up that ladder of wealth with ease, while others feel stuck in the rat race despite earning a decent living, today's episode's for you. We're diving into the ideas behind my book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits, which I wrote with Tom Corley, where we explore the simple but powerful habits that separate the rich from the average person. And I'm joined by Brett Warren, National Director of Metropole, who'll be taking the reins today, asking me those big questions. We're going to talk about why the rich do get richer, the biggest financial mistakes people make, and for those of you wondering if wealth really is within your reach, what you can do right now to get on track. Brett and I are going to unpack it all, and this episode could change the way you think about money, success, and your own potential. So let's get started.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment, and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect, and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now, here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Hi, Brett.
Hi, Michael. Good to be with you, and really looking forward to this one because I'm a big fan of the book Rich Habits, Poor Habits. I've enjoyed really listening to yourself and obviously Tom Corley, who I've heard speak at Wealth Retreat, talk about this book. It's an international bestseller. I think there's so many things in there that highlight what the wealthy do to succeed, and I think there's some really practical steps. I used to think to become wealthy or successful or rich, you'd have to win lotto or flip a property or do something amazing, but there's actually some practical steps you can take to get you to that point. It's a series of little things. So I know there's some people who are listening that may think the odds are stacked against them, and there probably are in certain ways more than others, but there's still ways to get around that and to get out of that. So I'd like to, ask you some of the questions today that some people might be thinking and others that might be listening. So the big why questions about how to start, where to start, what to do, and some of the things you've come across in your time, Michael. So let's kick things off by addressing some of the things that hold people back. And my first question is, why is it that most people never get out of the rat race, despite living in a wealthy country like Australia and earning a good living?
Well, interestingly, what you suggested was that everyone in Australia in particular has got the opportunities to become wealthy, even though currently some of the things are, in your words, stacked against them. Yes, we're not oblivious to the challenges that many people are having with high interest rates, the rising cost of living. But in my mind, the reason most people don't get out of the rat race is because of their poor money habits. They don't know how to do money. Well, they're not what I call financially fluent. Sure, we've always got financial challenges and the rich are getting richer, but what I don't like seeing in this lovely country we live in is that the gap between the rich and poor is widening. Most people don't get out of the rat race, as I said, because they've just got poor habits. They were taught by well-meaning people, their parents, but by what I'd call unwealthy people. So they've developed bad money habits. And you're right, at Wealth Retreat, we spend quite a bit of time talking about this to a group of already very successful business people and entrepreneurs, and yet they also all share the same similar stories, that they've got limiting beliefs, that they saw challenges at home that still affect them in some ways. In general, in Australia, I think people spend more money than they earn, so they're always owing other people money. They don't build an asset base. They don't have their money working for them. And in general, Brett, they don't even know why they're there in this situation. Because as you said, they think, the rich are lucky, the rich are greedy. In reality, there aren't many options. You can either invest in shares, you can set up a great business, or you can own a business, or you can invest in real estate. And these opportunities are available to everybody. And at Metropole, even though we do spend a lot of time talking about property, we accept that there's a number of different ways to get wealthy, aren't there?
There are, and it reminds me of that pie chart, Michael, the pie chart where you know what you know, you know what you don't know, and in many cases you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's a space that when we're growing up, when we're being educated, and our role models and things like that as well. It's a potential area we're not delving into, and I think it's something that, obviously it's a conscious decision you actually have to make. You can't just go through life and expect to be lucky.
But in the old days, when you and I used to do seminars, I'd say, put up your hands if you had wealthy parents. And a small group of people did. And if you think about it, the conversations around their kitchen table were very different to the conversations around my kitchen table when I grew up, or yours. So our parents are our mentors, and they bring us up with disempowering beliefs, poor habits that hold us back. None of us were born knowing how to do money, so we've been programmed by unwealthy people, even though they had the best intentions for us. But the good news is you can be reprogrammed. But the trouble is most people wake up every day, for the most part, rethinking 90% of what they thought the day before. Isn't it amazing? They're expecting a different result, Brett, when they're thinking of the same thing and doing the same thing.
Yes, I know that saying too, Michael. I'll just pick up on something you said before about, the rich keep getting richer. Is that true? And if so, why?
Well, it is true. And the studies around the world confirm that. In Australia, it confirms that too. And there's a shrinking middle class, as Simon Kirstenmacher explains beautifully in our Demographics Decoded podcast. And while there are people around the world with challenges, in Australia, where everyone's got the opportunity who wants a job to have a job, they can join the class of the rich. But the main reason the rich are getting richer is because of the way they think, and also, Brett, because of the way they invest. It's been shown that in Australia, most of Australia's wealth is in real estate and superannuation. So the rich know how to do money, while the average Australian doesn't.
Yeah, it's the rules of the game, isn't it? It's understanding the rules of the game and then making the most of it. What does differentiate the rich or the wealthy successful from just the average person?
I could answer it because they got more money, but maybe that's not what you wanted me to say. I guess it's their habits. They spend less than they earn. They understand the benefit of delayed gratification. They become rich slowly. They don't even try to become rich overnight. But I know, Brett, that you see with your team at Metropolitan, the wealth strategists and the buyer's agents, a lot of people now with social media think they should be able to become rich before Christmas. It doesn't work that way, does it?
No, it absolutely doesn't. I'm getting those emails at the moment as well, Michael. But and that's my experience as well. It takes a long period of time, and it takes a lot of series of events and very, very important decisions to make that. And the rich seem to be able to make those decisions with discipline, delayed gratification, spending less than they earn, and investing the money into wise things. Whereas, unfortunately, the average person just doesn't compete with that space.
I think another factor is the rich hang around the right people. They educate themselves, they have mentors, they have advisors, they're prepared to pay for advice. While the average Australian gets their advice for free from the internet or from TikTok or from Instagram. And it's interesting, the rich are prepared to invest in themselves. And I know once a year we get together at Wealth Retreat with a small group of wealthy investors and entrepreneurs, and they set aside 5 days of their time, and often a bit more because they take a bit of time on either side to enjoy it. And it's not a cheap investment because it's a substantial event, but they invest in themselves knowing that's the best investment they can make.
I heard you at a Wealth Retreat once say a young couple come up to you and we were talking about Wealth Retreat and the cost, and they kind of said, well, it's easy for the lady over there. She's rich. And you said, no, that's why she's rich, because it's easy for her, or something along those lines. So I
Isn't it amazing, Brett, the things you remember? At my age, I've forgotten. But you're 100% right. So for those wealthy people, it's a no-brainer decision, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's how they get there. So, look, in your books, you also discuss the 5 levels of wealth. So we're talking about distinguishing between different levels. What are they and why does that matter?
Okay, well, your financial life is a journey, and most of us hope to work up our way up the financial ladder so you can enjoy more freedom, more choices. Because if you think about it, the properties, the wealth, some of us want to accumulate stuff, but for most of us, it's to have more choices in life and to leave things for future generations. And as I studied the wealthy, I realized there's a hierarchy, a wealth pyramid, with more people at the bottom with limited amounts of wealth and fewer people up each stage of the pyramid as you move up. So I believe it's really important to understand where you are in the hierarchy so you know what you need to do to move to the next level. Now, first of all, let me give a disclaimer, because At the moment, we're talking about money and wealth, and I know it's going to offend some people. And I'm not making a suggesting the rich are better or any more worthy than the poor. This is not a judge of people.
Yep.
And I'd also like to make it clear that money's important in those areas of life where money's important, and it's of no benefit at all in other areas of your life where money isn't important. However, you've heard me say before, Brett, that any problem that money can solve isn't really a problem, which is, I guess, the reason most of us want to become wealthier. So I found that we all fit into one of these 5 levels, which not surprisingly correlate to where we are along our investment journey. And each stage comes with its own, I guess, challenges, but also celebrations. So level 0 at the bottom, most Australians live paycheck to paycheck. Well, we don't have paychecks anymore, but pay period. And that's what I call financial instability. If they lose their job or have an emergency such as an illness or their car breaks down, they've just got no money, no reserves to cope. How can they handle the unexpected burdens that life dishes out with no spare cash? Often the only way out is to borrow more to get further in debt, and this only creates more hardship. Next level up, Brett, is financial stability. To reach this, in my mind, you've got enough assets, savings, line of credit, something to cover your current living expenses for a minimum of 6 months. You've got private health insurance, some life insurance to protect you. And when you attain financial stability, at least you've got the comfort, Brett, of knowing that should anything unexpected come your way, your family's lifestyle won't be unduly compromised. You got time to look for a new job, for new sources of income. Now, of course, all this came home over COVID when a lot of people lost security. Yep. Level 2 is financial security. You've accumulated sufficient assets to generate enough passive income to cover your most basic expenses. You've got a property portfolio that's got some income coming in and some equity that covers your mortgages and your home-related expenses, your tax payment, your car expenses, your grocery bills. When you reach that level, financial security, then you can stop working. You could, I guess, maintain a simple lifestyle, but smart property investors can easily achieve this by growing a property portfolio, but it's really not enough. Level 3 then is financial freedom, and that's when you've accumulated sufficient assets to generate enough passive income to pay for the lifestyle you want, you desire, not your current lifestyle, pays for your expenses without ever having to work. Interestingly, when you're a successful investor like that, it doesn't mean you don't go to work again. Again, when we see the investors at Wealth Retreat, they're still working, they're still enjoying their lives, Brett, but they got financial freedom, haven't they?
Yeah, they absolutely do, and that allows them to have choices and make more important decisions and be comfortable and secure.
Well, there's one level above that, level 4, which I call financial abundance. And a small group of sophisticated investors achieve this when their portfolio works overtime and they're free of the financial pressures. They got so much income that pays for their lifestyle, their expenses, and they contribute back to the community through charities, through donation. And despite that, the asset base continues to grow. I recently read that Warren Buffett is again giving billions of his money away to charities once again, rather than his children. But he's got so much that despite having given billions away, he's at that level 4 clearly, where his still personal asset base grows. And that's where we like to get our clients at Metropole as well. And when you get to this lovely group of people together once a year at Wealth Retreat, people wonder, they look from the outside and say, look, they got their cars, they got their lifestyle. What are these greedy people doing, wanting to get more? And you find a lot want to give back to the community. They want to give back to future generations, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely, especially once they've set up themselves and their own family and built a legacy. You often enjoyed talking to me about legacy and how you're paying your grandkids school fees and things like that as well. So that's a big part of giving back. Michael, take me back. You talked about that first level and, I guess living paycheck to paycheck. I can kind of go back to probably my early 20s. I was in that situation. When you're first starting out, you've got a job. I think my goal was to try and save $500, and every time I'd get to $500, my car tires would go or something would happen. I'd never be able to get past that point. For those that maybe are in that space and they've continued to be in that space for a period of time, maybe they're not so poor or unsuccessful or middle class. How do they get through to that next level? What are some of the tricks that can get them on the track to financial success and get them through that phase?
Well, I think the first thing is to decide you want to become wealthy, because there's a group of people out there, and we see the trolls on the internet keep telling us about greedy and ugly and it's not fair and the system's not fair. Accept the fact that there's nothing wrong with being wealthy and decide you want to become wealthy. Choose a figure, choose a number, choose a date that you're going to become financially free. Number two, invest in your education, no matter where you are. Again, the people who come to Wealth Retreat who are already successful, keep investing in their education. If you're more experienced, you have different levels of education you need, like asset protection and estate planning. But don't wait till you know it all to get started, because if you do, you'll never take the first step. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And then surround yourself with the right people, like-minded people. There's no such thing as a self-made millionaire. Even financially independent investors that we come across, they've got a smart team of people around them, professionals, advisors, and a community of like-minded people. Interestingly, a lot of the people that we see who join us at Wealth Retreat, one of their initial concerns is isolation. They don't have many people to share their wishes with, their successes and their failures. But the lovely thing about money is it doesn't discriminate. Money doesn't care who you are, what you think you are, where your parents came from, what you did. Each day starts with a clean slate. So if you have you've got the same right, the same opportunity as everyone else to become wealthy, decide to do it and then just go ahead, Brett.
It's a good point. It's something practical that really helped me, and when I'm looking back now and after listening to yourself and Tom, is to pay yourself first. So every time you get paid, 10% of your pay goes into an account. You're never going to see it again, but that's your investment funding and your investment money. It's not for drinks or going and buying new clothes or going on a holiday. That sits there. So reversing the order in which you do things, making those types of things a priority, and then you've got the ability to invest those types of things. And getting back to your point as well about procrastination, I mean, I've had a lot of people that I've kind of sat with in the last probably 12 months, and they've come back to me now after they've done things and worked things out. And, if you're looking at that in Brisbane, I mean, the Brisbane market's grown 15%. So, you've really got to take action once you've decided that and educate yourself and do that. But you've got to get moving, don't you? It's not a case of educating yourself for the next 5 years and knowing everything and then going out and doing something.
Well, it's also, where do you educate yourself from? When I first started investing, there were not many opportunities. Today, there are too many. So you've also got to learn from somebody who has actually achieved what you want, but has kept it. At the moment, there's a whole wave of new gurus, let's call them, experts, buyers agents, who've done well. But hey, if you bought anything in Perth, even in the secondary locations last year and the year before, it's gone up 20, 30, 40%, and they look really smart. They weren't. And so you've actually got to speak with people who aren't just lucky once, but also have been around the block a few cycles and learned the lessons from them. Get a mentor. Get the right sort of mentor, though. Be realistic. No get-rich-quick schemes. And as we keep saying, develop good money habits.
Well said. Who do you blame for most people not taking the next step in becoming wealthy, I guess?
Interesting. Well, I know who the poor blame. They blame the government. They blame high interest rates. They blame their parents. They blame the education system. It's not fair. You've got to take responsibility. You've got to become the pilot of your life, not just the passenger taken along for a ride. We learn what we learn from our mentors. Our early mentors were our parents. So an important lesson here for those of us who are parents and grandparents is to be careful what money habits you pass on to your loved one. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it, Brett?
No, it doesn't. And I often hear you talk about the majority, probably 90% of people actually fall in line and follow through with those lessons. But there's only those 10% of people that actually rebel and actually grow outside of that. So I think you're right. The hardest thing is to, I guess, take the first step. And so many people think that it's an outside influence or the odds are stacked against them. But no matter who you are, there is a percentage, whether it's 1% or 50%, that you can actually take control of your life. You can actually make a difference and put some practicality in there.
I agree.
Next one. What are the biggest financial mistakes that you do see the average person make?
Well, let's go back to that book, The Richest Man in Babylon, where they say spend less than you earn, save 10%, invest and keep reinvesting. I know you've already said that. I think that's one thing. The other big thing is that most Australians don't know the difference between an asset and a liability. So you've got to become financially fluent. They take on too much bad debt. Oh, another big one is that they think the credit card limits their money, Brett. It's
Yes.
not. You're buying it with your future money and you're paying interest now to have the right to have it.
That's right.
And maybe another big mistake is they don't build an asset base. Many people invest for cash flow because they think they need money. In my mind, you should be building assets, which one day will give you a cash machine. Buy properties to buy more properties to build an asset base. And that's what I know our team at Metropole does. We actually help them buy time with cash flow buffers, but using the properties to buy more properties. And as you said before, delayed gratification and just taking time. And we recognize that there's 4 stages of wealth, and the average person, you ask the mistakes, I don't think they do. Stage 1 is education. Stage 2 is the growth stage. You need to borrow, you need to leverage, you need to gear, and you need time. And then the next stage is transitioning as you lower your loan to value ratios, and then you can enjoy wealth. It doesn't come quickly. It doesn't come easily, Brett.
No, and that's not probably what people want to hear, but that's the truth, right?
It is.
Michael, you're probably one of the most wealthy and successful people I know, and most people probably want me to ask this. Why are you still working?
I know others have wondered the same. Is he really financially independent? Why is he doing all this? I'd like to answer that because there are some instructive lessons for everyone who wants to develop financial freedom, and particularly if you want to do so by growing a multi-million-dollar property portfolio. Firstly, to the answer to the second question, yes, I am truly financially independent, having over the years built a very substantial property investment portfolio of residential, commercial, industrial and retail properties. In my podcast, I often talk about the concept of building yourself a cash machine. Pam and I truly got a cash machine that gives us real choices in life. But I think the big lesson will come out of my answer to the question you asked, why am I still working? Let me explain a little story. I remember a number of years ago reading that Ringo Starr, the famous Beatle, was still touring in America. At that time, he was 74 years old. He was doing a multi-city tour of America, aged at 74, going to one city, performing, leaving, going to the next place. At 74, he was still on tour. And Mick Jagger is still doing the same thing, and he's much older. So I suppose it's reassuring to me. It suggests that in the future, I may still be able to somehow or other either get up on that stage and deliver the wealth retreat or come here for the podcast. As far as I know, neither Ringo nor Mick Jagger have got any unmet financial needs. They're still touring largely because they got nothing better to do. I think a more constructive comment would be they're still touring because there's nothing else that they'd do that would give them comparable enthusiasm. Why they stay at it as long as they have reveals why certain people become successful at things. I've found, Brett, most top achievers who are successful at what they do in whatever industry, whether it's property or business, and they become rich, is because they develop an enthusiasm for it, whatever it is. And that not doing it is, I guess, akin to severing an arm. You know, my kids say they can't imagine me ever retiring. But what I'm trying to say, I guess, in a long-winded way, is that many people don't seem to understand the reason so many business people, entrepreneurs, property investors became so successful, became so rich, comes from their enthusiasm they had in the first place. So that's, I guess, an important lesson. If you're doing something you don't have to do, won't quickly develop an intense enthusiasm for it, the likelihood of you achieving substantial success or becoming rich from it are pretty slim. So the main reason I'm working is I still get a buzz out of doing these podcasts, writing the blogs, putting training together, educating investors, and interestingly, hearing about the successes of our clients. That makes me feel good. I mean, I spend all day talking about property, drinking coffee, which I've actually got here, dealing with nice people. Why wouldn't I still be working? And I'm clearly unashamedly, intensely enthusiastic about still making and multiplying my money. I'm not ashamed of that. I enjoy passing it on, helping charities, helping future generations, and contributing to the world. By the way, I'm also grateful for what I've got, and I believe, therefore, it's my obligation to repay the world. And that's partly why I know you similarly spend so much time writing and educating. Sure, we've got a business of Metropole and we make money from it, but we get a lot of satisfaction by helping people, don't we, Brett?
I think so. And look, you can go back to Ringo Starr and what you were talking about there, because I'm sure they get equal satisfaction playing into a crowd and getting the response and having people singing along, and in some way seeing the outcomes that our clients achieve and actually genuinely helping people. it's a bit like an addiction, a bit like a drug, isn't it? You enjoy helping people. You've got that knowledge to be able to do that. And I think that's a really good point. So thank you very much, Michael. I think there's some really good takeaways there.
Sure. Well, again, maybe one other takeaway, if I could give an unashamed plug for Wealth Retreat, which we will be holding on the Gold Coast in May this year. Now, don't count yourself out, and you're going to get lots of promotions from this. And interestingly, every year when we speak to people who wonder, should they come or shouldn't they come? Some people count themselves out. It's that imposter syndrome. I'm not ready for it yet. What if they don't think I'm good enough? We will have a chat with you. One of the team will have a chat to make sure it's suitable for you. We keep the room small, and it's much, much more than the property seminar. I'm almost embarrassed to say it's life-changing, but boy, have we seen the success results of people. And the theme of Wealth Retreat is where you're going to be in 5 years' time in all areas of your life. So we do speak about the mindset and success, because if we don't declutter the mind from those limiting beliefs, the next lessons, all the lessons that are given, won't work as efficiently. And then I know you're going to spend a lot of time talking about property and research and the strategies the wealthy people do. Greg Hankinson is going to be giving explanations about how successful investors manufacture capital growth through property development. Ken Race is going to be talking about tax and legally minimizing your tax, but also estate planning and correct structuring. Hung Choi is going to tell you how to get the banks to say more often. Gee, there's too many speakers. Tom Corley's doing a video presentation because his son's getting married that weekend. He can't come and join us. There's a whole faculty. So go to wealthretreat.com.au and you can't book in. You actually just express your interest, and one of our team will contact you and have a chat with you, find out where you are, explain if it's suitable for you. And since it's still early in the marketing campaign, there is an early bird special. Go to wealthretreat.com.au. And Brett, just maybe a final thought, because you've been to so many of them now. What would you say to somebody who's watching this and thinks, I'll leave it till next year?
Yeah, look, I guess, I'm with Metropulse. Look, if I just take myself as a person and separate that, look, I wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for Wealth Retreat. I've grown over that journey. Look, you spoke about all those kind of practical things about finance and property and tax and all those things, which are great, and they really help you get to the next level. But when was the last time our listeners have worked for 5 days on themselves, their goals, their mindset, unblock some of those things to get you through the next level? And I wouldn't be your business partner today if I hadn't been through, 8 to 10 wealth retreats over that period of time. And each year we grow, we reset, we become better at what we're doing and better with who we are. And we spoke before about, how does someone start? Now, obviously, that's quite a leap to go from level 1 to where we're talking about now, but it's just taking action and taking a first step. And this is a full immersive experience, isn't it? Because you're there, you're living, you're breathing, you've got those networks around you. So it's not like learning by distance, and that makes a huge difference.
Very, very different. You're right. You can only get so much from podcasts, from the internet, from books, and having a community around you helps the isolation and gives clarity. But the other thing is, because we keep the community small, there's opportunities to speak to all the experts one-on-one, have breakfast, lunch, dinner with them. And I always do after Wealth Retreat, a one-on-one implementation session with everybody to make sure that they get the best out of it. So thanks for allowing us to have that shameless plug, people who are watching and listening to this. And Brett, look forward to catching up with you again real soon for the Michael Yardney podcast once more. Thank you for turning the tables and having me talking.
Always good to put the pressure on you back on you, Michael. Thank you.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In my mindset message today, I want to teach you another lesson that I learned from one of my early mentors, Jim Rohn. I often quote him because his inspiration helped me achieve the success I have. And his lesson I'd like to share with you today is don't be a complainer. Jim Rohn said there's room for legitimate complaining, but if you let this deadly disease of attitude happen, complaining will conquer you. Interesting wording, a deadly disease of attitude. See, Jim Rohn thought complaining could take over your life. It could destroy you and leave you without anything. He said no one wants to be with a complainer. Jim Rohn said no one wants to promote a complainer. No one wants to live with one. no one wants to partner with one. But I bet that you've found people in your life that are like that. You know what it's like. Complaining leaves you out of more opportunities than you can possibly imagine if you let it take over and grab you by the throat. So Jim Rohn said, if you don't think complaining is bad, ask the children of Israel of Old Testament fame. Now, he often quoted the Bible, but in this particular case, he said that these are typical of all of us, but their story happened to get in the book. He's talking about the Old Testament. The story says that the children of Israel were slaves in Egypt, and God performed a series of dazzling miracles and got them out. And now they had their freedom and they were heading for the promised land. But the tragedy of the story, according to Jim Rohn, was they never got there. And the reason was from day one, they started to complain. Jim Rohn said they griped about their food. They had just been delivered from slavery and they were complaining about the food. And they whined and cried and griped about the water. And in the desert, they actually had water to drink. But I don't know, I guess it didn't taste that good. And they whined and complained about the leadership. The leadership that had just delivered them from slavery. And they complained it was too hot, too cold, too far, too difficult, too rocky. They whined and cried for years, 40 to be exact. Finally, according to Jim Rohn, God said, I've had it. Trip cancelled. And the story says they died in the desert and never reached the promised land after all that trouble. So Jim Rohn gave a lesson. He said he believed there were two teachings from this. Number one, indulging in complaining long enough and you're going to get your future cancelled. Future promotions, future opportunities. And number two, even God himself can only take so much complaining. Look, I think you get the point, don't you? Complaining is not for winners. In my mind, you must focus on what you can do, not on what you can't do. You must focus on the opportunities that are there, not the difficulties, because there's always going to be difficulties. And in my mind, when you do this, it won't only inspire you, but you're also going to set an example for others to follow. So, in short, my mentorship message for you today is, don't be a complainer. Thank you for spending the last little while with me. I hope you got some benefit from this show. But before you move on to the next podcast you're going to listen to, let me remind you I have another show that I produce once a week with leading demographer Simon Kirstenmacher. We call that Demographics Decoded, where Simon and I unveil the trends that are going to shape your future. In my mind, this is a must-listen to podcast for anyone interested in property investment, but also for business people and entrepreneurs. So if you don't currently subscribe to Demographics Decoded, just please stop for a second and subscribe on your podcast app where you're listening to this, or on YouTube. And of course, if you don't subscribe to this show, the Michael Yardney podcast, why not click the link that says follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. So twice a week, you're going to get benefit from my guests and me. Oh, and I'd like to ask you a little favour, please. If you did enjoy today's show and you know somebody who would also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast and Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcast, there are 3 little buttons at the top of the player. Or just tell them about it. Just have a chat with them. Now, I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing me a favour in my quest to help as many people as possible to become financially literate. And by the way, I've got a special bonus for you. As my way of saying thank you for subscribing, just go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where I've got a bunch of ebooks and reports. It's just my way of saying thank you for taking the time to listen. And remember, the information that we give you in this podcast is general information, not specific information about your personal circumstances, because we don't know about them. But if you do want specific information, you can always have a chat with my team at Metropole. Go to metropole.com.au. If you really want to learn more, you can always listen to the previous podcast, the many episodes we've already published. Just go back to the old episodes, which each have lessons about property investment, success, and money. Once again, thanks for listening to today's show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney Podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?